The woman stumbled into the trading post at the edge of the Colorado Rockies, with snow clinging to her threadbare coat and blood frozen on her split lip. Her eyes wild with the kind of fear that comes from running for your life. Kade Ramsey looked up from the beaver pelts he was sorting, his calloused hands stilling as he took in the sight of her. She was maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair matted against her pale face and clothes that spoke of a life far removed from these mountains. Her boots were city-made, already falling apart at the seams, and she swayed on her feet like a pine tree in a windstorm. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I need help." The year was 1876, and Kade had been living alone in these mountains for the better part of 6 years, ever since he turned 24 and decided that civilization held nothing for him but disappointment and noise. He was 30 now, broad-shouldered and bearded, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of river stones. Most folks who made it this far up the mountain were trappers or traders, men who knew the wilderness and respected it. This woman looked like she had never spent a day outside a parlor. "Madam," he said, setting down the pelt and rising to his full height of 6 feet 3 inches. "You hurt?" She shook her head, then immediately contradicted herself by pressing a hand to her ribs and wincing. "My husband." "Former husband. He is coming." I ran. Kade did not need more explanation than that. He had seen enough of the world to know what drove a woman into the wilderness wearing nothing but fear and determination. How far back? I do not know. Hours, maybe. I stole his horse, but it threw me near the creek down the mountain. I have been walking since dawn. That meant she had covered at least 8 miles on foot through snow and forest. Kade felt a flicker of respect. "You alone?" "Yes, he alone." She hesitated, and that told Kade everything. "He has 2 men with him, brothers. They work for him." "What is he to you that he would bring men hunting?" "Clara Douglas." She said the name like it was poison. "We were married 3 months ago in Denver. He seemed kind at first, then he showed me who he truly was." "I am Clara Douglas, and I will not go back to him." Kade studied her for a long moment. Clara Douglas had the kind of beauty that belonged in daguerreotypes and fine paintings, all delicate features and large brown eyes. But there was steel in her spine despite the trembling in her hands. She had run into the wilderness rather than stay with a man who hurt her, and that took a certain kind of courage. "Can you shoot?" he asked. "No. Can you ride?" "Yes, but I have no horse now." Kade walked to the door of the trading post and looked out at the gray November sky. Snow was coming. He could smell it in the air. If this Clara Douglas and his men were tracking Clara, they would be slowed by the storm but not stopped. And if they made it this far, there would be trouble. "I have a cabin about 2 miles north," Kade said, turning back to her. "It is defensible and stocked for winter. We go there, you rest, and we figure out what comes next." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Do not need to know you to know running from a man in the dead of winter means you had good reason." Kade pulled on his heavy coat and began gathering supplies. "Can you walk 2 more miles?" "Yes." "Then we leave now. Storm is coming and it will cover our tracks." He gave her his spare coat, thick bearskin that swallowed her small frame, and a pair of his old boots stuffed with cloth to make them fit. She did not complain about any of it, just pulled everything on with shaking hands and followed him out into the cold. The trading post belonged to a man named Samuel, who spent winters down in Silver City and only came up in the spring and summer months. Kade had been watching it for him in exchange for supplies. Now he locked it up tight and led Clara into the forest, moving with the easy stride of a man who knew every rock and tree. She struggled to keep up, her breath coming in harsh gasps, but she never asked him to slow down. Kade could hear her behind him, stumbling over roots and stones, but always getting back up and continuing. It reminded him of a wounded deer he had once seen, determined to reach safety no matter the cost. When they finally reached the cabin, snow had begun to fall in earnest. Kade's home was built into the side of the mountain, solid logs chinked with mud and moss, with a stone chimney and shutters that could be barred from inside. It was not much to look at, but it had kept him alive through 6 hard winters. He opened the door and ushered Clara inside, then immediately set about building up the fire while she stood dripping melted snow onto his floor. The cabin was a single large room with a sleeping loft above, a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall, and shelves lined with preserved food, ammunition, and the various tools of mountain living. Furs covered the plank floor and the narrow bed in the corner, and a table with 2 chairs sat near the fire. "Sit," Kade said, pointing to one of the chairs. "Get warm." Clara sank down like her legs had given out, which they probably had. Kade hung a pot of water over the fire to heat, then rummaged through his supplies until he found dried venison and hard biscuits. It was not fancy food, but it would fill an empty belly. While the water heated, he turned to look at Clara properly for the first time since they had reached the cabin. She was staring into the flames with an expression of such profound exhaustion that it made something in his chest tighten. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "Yesterday morning." Kade handed her the venison and biscuits without a word. She ate slowly at first, as if afraid he might take it away, then faster as hunger won out over caution. He made coffee when the water boiled, strong and bitter the way he liked it, and gave her a cup. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of this. I had nowhere else to go." "How did you know about the trading post?" "I did not. I just kept walking uphill, thinking if I could get high enough, far enough, he would not follow. Then I saw the building and hoped someone might be there." "Lucky," Kade said. "Yes." Clara wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "Or perhaps God has not entirely abandoned me." Kade did not have much use for talk of God, but he kept that to himself. Instead he said, "Tell me about your husband. What kind of man is he?" Clara's face went hard. "The kind who smiles at you in public and breaks your ribs in private." "The kind who told me on our wedding night that I was his property now, bought and paid for. My father owed him money, you see. The marriage was how the debt was settled. Your father sold you. My father is dead. He died owing Carlton $5,000 from a bad business deal. Carlton came to me and said he would forgive the debt if I married him. I was alone with no money and no prospects. I thought it was my only choice." She looked up at Kade, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was wrong. I should have run the moment he proposed. But I was scared and foolish, and I thought maybe he truly cared for me." Kade felt anger rising in his chest, hot and fierce. He had left civilization behind partly because of men like Clara Douglas, men who thought money and power gave them the right to own other people. "You are not foolish for wanting to believe someone cared for you. You are only human." "I stayed for 3 months. 3 months of him hitting me, controlling me, telling me I was worthless. Then last week he told me he was going to take me to his ranch in the San Luis Valley, far from Denver where no one would hear me scream. That is when I knew if I did not run, I would die there. So you ran." "So I ran." Clara set down her coffee cup. "I waited until he went to his club, took money from his desk, stole his fastest horse and rode north. I thought maybe I could make it to Cheyenne, find work somehow. But the horse threw me, and now I have nothing except the clothes on my back and the kindness of a stranger." Kade stood and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. It was coming down thick now, the kind of storm that would last for days and bury the mountain under several feet of white. Clara Douglas and his men would have to hole up somewhere until it passed, which gave them time. "You are safe here," he said. "This cabin is built to withstand worse than a snowstorm, and I have enough supplies to last through spring if needed. No one is taking you anywhere you do not want to go." "But you do not even know me," Clara said again, as if she could not quite believe his generosity. Kade turned to look at her. "I know enough. You ran into a blizzard rather than stay with a man who hurt you. That tells me you have courage. You walked 8 miles through snow and forest without complaint. That tells me you are strong. And you are sitting in my cabin trusting me not to harm you, which tells me you have hope left despite everything. That is all I need to know." Clara's face crumpled then, and she began to cry in earnest, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Kade stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure what to do. He was not accustomed to tears. Finally, he went to her and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort even if he did not quite know how. "You are safe now," he said quietly. "I give you my word." She nodded, unable to speak, and Kade left her to cry while he busied himself around the cabin. He checked the shutters to make sure they were secure, added more wood to the fire, and laid out blankets and furs to make a proper bed. Clara would take the bed in the corner, and he would sleep in the loft as he usually did. By the time he finished, Clara had composed herself. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked at him with something like wonder. "I do not even know your name," she said. "Kade Ramsey." "Kade," she tested the name on her tongue. "It suits you. Folks say I am too much like this mountain, hard and unyielding." "I think the mountain saved my life today," Clara said softly. "Both the stone one and the man one." Kade felt heat rise to his face and turned away to hide it. He was not accustomed to gratitude or kind words. "Get some rest. You look ready to fall over." Clara did not argue. She stood on shaking legs and made her way to the bed, collapsing onto it fully clothed. Within minutes she was asleep, her breathing deep, and even despite the occasional whimper that suggested bad dreams. Kade sat by the fire and listened to the storm rage outside, his rifle across his knees. He did not know Clara Douglas, but he knew men like him. They did not give up easily, especially when it came to something they considered their property. When the snow cleared, Douglas would come looking, and when he did, Kade would be ready. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, Kade and Clara fell into an easy routine. She would wake each morning to find him already up, coffee made and breakfast cooking over the fire. He was not much of a cook, but he could manage cornmeal mush and fried salt pork, and Clara ate it without complaint. At first she was quiet, almost withdrawn, as if waiting for Kade to show his true colors. But he went about his business with the same steady calm he always had, treating her with respect and keeping his distance. Slowly, she began to relax. On the second day, she started talking. She told him about her life in Denver, about her father who had been a merchant before his business failed, about her mother who died when Clara was young. She told him about the friends she had left behind, the life she had thought she would have, and the reality that had replaced it. Kade listened more than he spoke, but when he did talk, Clara listened with the kind of attention that suggested she genuinely cared about his words. He told her about growing up in Silver City in the New Mexico territory, about his parents who had died from fever when he was 19, about the years he spent drifting west before finally settling in these mountains. "Why here?" Clara asked on the third day as they sat by the fire watching snow fall past the window. "Because it is honest," Kade said. "The mountain does not lie to you. It does not pretend to be something it is not. If you respect it, it will sustain you. If you do not, it will kill you. There is a purity in that I could not find anywhere else." "Do you ever get lonely?" Kade considered the question. "Sometimes, but I prefer lonely to the kind of company most people offer." "What kind is that? The kind that wants something from you?" The kind that sees you as a means to an end rather than a person. Clara nodded slowly. I understand that more than you know. The snow stopped falling on the morning of the fourth day. Kade woke before dawn and climbed down from the loft to find Clara already awake, sitting by the fire with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Could not sleep, he asked. I keep thinking about Carlton, about whether he is still looking for me. He is looking, Kade said. Men like that do not give up. Then what do? I cannot hide here forever. Kade poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. Why not? Clara blinked. What do you mean? I mean winter is here. The passes will be snowed in until spring. Even if your husband knows you came up the mountain, he cannot reach you now. Come spring, we figure out a more permanent solution. But I cannot just stay here with you. It would not be proper. Kade almost laughed at that. Clara, you are in the middle of the wilderness running from a man who wants to hurt you. Proper does not enter into it. Besides, no one knows you are here except me, and I am not about to tell anyone. But what would I do? How would I help? I do not know anything about living like this. Then I will teach you. Kade said it simply, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. You can learn to shoot, to trap, to cure meat and tan hides. Come spring, you will have skills that can keep you alive anywhere in the West, married or not. Clara stared at him. You would do that for me. I am already doing it, am I not? She smiled then, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. For a moment Kade forgot how to breathe, struck by the realization that Clara Douglas was perhaps the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and that he was suddenly very aware of sharing a small cabin with her. He cleared his throat and stood abruptly. I need to check the trap lines. You should eat something and keep the fire going. I will be back before dark. He left before she could respond, stepping out into the bright cold morning and sucking in deep lungfuls of air. The snow was knee-deep and pristine, the world transformed into something clean and white. Kade moved through it with practiced ease, checking the snares and traps he had set before the storm. As he worked, he tried not to think about Clara's smile or the way his heart had stuttered in his chest. He had lived alone for 6 years because he preferred it that way, because relationships were complicated and painful, and he had no use for them. The last woman he had cared for had been in Silver City, a merchant's daughter named Sarah, who told him she loved him right up until a wealthier man came to town, and she married him instead. Kade had learned his lesson then about trusting people with his heart, but Clara was different. She was not looking for wealth or status. She was just looking for safety, for kindness, for a place to rest after running for her life. And something about her called to the part of Kade that he had thought long dead, the part that wanted to protect and provide and care for someone other than himself. He shook his head and focused on the traps. 2 had rabbits, 1 had a pine marten, and the rest were empty. It was enough for dinner and then some. He reset the empty traps and headed back toward the cabin, taking his time to clear his head. When he opened the door, the smell of fresh bread hit him like a wall. Clara stood by the fire, her face flushed from the heat, pulling a cast iron pot out of the coals. Somehow she had managed to make biscuits. I found flour and lard, she said, looking pleased with herself. I am not much use in the wilderness, but I can cook. My mother taught me before she died. Kade set down the rabbits and marten. You did not have to do that. I wanted to. You have given me so much. Let me give something back. They ate the biscuits with honey that Kade had traded for last summer, and Clara declared them the best thing she had tasted in months. Kade thought they might be the best thing he had tasted in years, though he suspected that had less to do with the biscuits themselves and more to do with the company. After dinner, as Clara had suggested earlier, Kade began teaching her. He started with the rifle, showing her how to load and aim, how to account for distance and wind. She was clumsy at first, flinching every time the gun fired, but she kept trying until her shoulder was bruised from the recoil and her hands were steady. "Good," Kade said after she managed to hit a tree trunk from 30 yards. "You are learning." "I never thought I would need to know how to shoot," Clara said, lowering the rifle. "My father believed women should be delicate and refined." "Delicate and refined does not keep you alive in the mountains." "No," Clara agreed, "but kindness does. Kindness and the generosity of a stranger who had no reason to help me." Kade felt that uncomfortable warmth in his chest again. "You needed help, I gave it, that is all." "No," Clara said quietly. "It is not all. You could have turned me away, you could have told me to solve my own problems, but you did not. You took me in, fed me, protected me, and now you are teaching me to protect myself. That is not nothing, Kade Ramsey, that is everything." Their eyes met and held for a long moment. Kade saw something in Clara's gaze that made his breath catch, something warm and wondering that he did not dare name. He looked away first, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "We should head back," he said gruffly. "Getting dark." They walked back to the cabin in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that came from two people who were beginning to understand each other. That night, as Kade lay in the loft listening to Clara's quiet breathing below, he found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years. Not just surviving winter, but what came after. And in every vision of spring that he conjured, Clara was there. Weeks passed and winter settled over the mountains in earnest. The snow piled higher, the temperatures dropped lower, and the world shrank to the size of Kade's cabin and the small clearing around it. But inside, something was growing. Clara proved to be a quick learner. Within a month, she could shoot well enough to bring down a deer at 100 yards. She learned to skin and butcher game, to tan hides until they were soft as cloth, to sew with sinew and make repairs to clothing and gear. Kade taught her which plants were safe to eat and which would kill her, how to read weather in the clouds and animal behavior, how to build a fire in the snow and find water under ice. But more than that, they learned each other. Kade discovered that Clara sang while she worked, old ballads her mother had taught her, her voice clear and sweet in the quiet cabin. He learned that she had a sharp sense of humor that caught him by surprise and made him laugh, something he had not done much of in recent years. He learned that she was braver than she thought, stronger than she knew, and kinder than anyone he had ever met. Clara learned that beneath Kade's gruff exterior was a man of deep feeling and strong principles. She learned that he read books, that he had a small collection of volumes he had packed up the mountain one by one and treasured like gold. She learned that he was patient and thoughtful, that he never raised his voice or his hand, that he treated her like a person of worth rather than an object to be used. And somewhere in the long winter nights, somewhere between the shooting lessons and the fireside conversations and the shared meals, they fell in love. It happened slowly, then all at once. A hand touching across the table, a shared smile over morning coffee. The way Kade looked at Clara when he thought she was not watching. The way Clara's face lit up every time Kade came through the door. It was Clara who spoke first. They were sitting by the fire one evening in late January, the wind howling outside and the cabin warm and snug. Kade was oiling his rifle and Clara was mending a tear in his spare shirt. The domesticity of it struck them both at the same moment, and when their eyes met, the truth was right there between them, impossible to ignore. "Kade," Clara said softly, "I need to tell you something." He set down the rifle, his heart suddenly pounding. "All right. I know I came here as a stranger seeking shelter. You gave me that and so much more. You gave me kindness when I had forgotten what it felt like. You gave me safety when I had none. You gave me skills and confidence and a reason to keep going. But somewhere along the way you gave me something else. Something I did not expect and do not deserve but want more than I have ever wanted anything. What is that? Kade's voice was rough. Hope. A future. The feeling that maybe I am worth something after all. Clara set down her mending and stood, crossing to where Kade sat. You became my home, Kade Ramsey, not this cabin, though I love it. You, your kindness, your strength, your goodness. I fell in love with you, and I know I have no right to burden you with that, but I cannot keep it inside any longer. Kade stared at her for a long moment, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to protect himself, to push her away before she could hurt him the way Sarah had hurt him. But Clara was not Sarah. Clara had never asked him for anything except safety, had never demanded more than he could give, had never looked at him with anything but honest affection and respect. You think you have no right, he said finally, standing so they were face to face. Clara, I have been in love with you since the day you smiled at me over those biscuits. Maybe before that. Maybe since the moment you stumbled into the trading post looking like a half-drowned cat, but refusing to give up. I did not speak because I thought you deserved better than a mountain man living alone in the wilderness. I thought once spring came, you would leave and find the life you were meant to have. Clara laughed, a sound of pure joy. This is the life I am meant to have, here with you. If you will have me. If I will have you. Kade reached out and cupped her face in his calloused hands. Clara Douglas, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I would be honored to have you in whatever way you will give yourself to me. Then have me, she whispered. Have all of me. My heart, my future, everything. I am yours if you want me. Kade kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the passion of someone who had been waiting their whole life for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. Does this mean you will marry me? Kade asked. I am already married, Clara said, then immediately shook her head. No, that is not true. Carlton Douglas never loved me or respected me. He did not treat me as a wife should be treated. That was not a marriage. That was a prison. Then we will make it right, Kade said firmly. Come spring, we will go to Silver City. We will find a lawyer and end your marriage to Douglas properly. And then, if you still want to, we will marry. The right way, with vows that mean something. I will still want to, Clara said, smiling through tears. I will always want to. They spent the rest of the winter as a couple, though they waited to make their union complete until they could do so as husband and wife in truth. It was both torture and bliss, being so close yet maintaining that boundary, but both agreed it felt right. Clara had been used and taken by Carlton Douglas. With Kade, everything would be different. Everything would be chosen freely and given with love. They talked long into the night about their future. Kade owned the cabin and the land around it, a claim he had filed properly in Silver City years ago. They could build a bigger house come spring, add a barn for livestock, maybe clear more land for a garden. Or if Clara wanted, they could go elsewhere, start fresh somewhere she had no memories of running and fear. But Clara insisted she wanted to stay. This mountain saved me, she said. This cabin was where I learned to be strong again. I do not want to leave it. I want to build a life here with you. So they made plans. They talked about children, about how many they wanted and what they would name them. They talked about the garden Clara would plant and the new traps Kade would set. They talked about buying a milk cow and some chickens, about Kade teaching their future children to hunt and Clara teaching them to read. It was in these conversations that Kade felt the last of his walls crumble. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself he preferred it that way. But with Clara, he remembered what it was like to share life with another person. Not just to exist alongside them, but to build something together, to care about someone else's happiness as much as his own. "I do not want you to think I am using you," Clara said one night as they lay by the fire, her head on his shoulder. "I know I came here with nothing and you have given me everything, but I am not staying because I need you to survive. I am staying because I love you." "I know that," Kade said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You proved yourself capable of surviving without me. You learned every skill I taught you, and you learned them well. You could leave tomorrow and make your way in the world if you wanted to. But you are choosing to stay, and that means everything to me." "I will always choose you," Clara said, "no matter what comes." Those words proved prophetic when, in early March, as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, trouble came knocking. Kade was outside splitting wood when he saw them. 3 men on horseback, picking their way up the mountain trail. Even at a distance he could tell they were not trappers or traders. They sat their horses like city men, uncomfortable and uncertain, and they were too well dressed for mountain life. He set down the axe and called out, "Clara, inside, now." She heard the urgency in his voice and obeyed without question, disappearing into the cabin. Kade picked up his rifle and stood waiting, his face impassive as the men drew closer. The lead rider was maybe 35, with dark hair slicked back and a thin mustache. He wore an expensive coat and carried himself with the arrogance of a man accustomed to getting his way. Kade knew immediately that this was Clara Douglas. "You there," Douglas called out when he was close enough. "Mountain man, I am looking for my wife, Clara Douglas. She ran off last fall, and I have reason to believe she came up this way." "That's so." Kade kept his voice neutral, his rifle held loosely but ready. "I am offering a reward for information. $50 to anyone who can tell me where she is. $50 is a lot of money." "She is worth it to me." Douglas smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. "I am a forgiving man. I just want my wife back where she belongs." Kade studied the 2 men flanking Douglas. They were younger, brothers by the look of them, with the hard eyes of men who had done violence and would do it again. One had his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "I have not seen any women up here," Kade said. "Just me and the bears." Douglas's smile faded. "Are you certain? Dark hair, brown eyes, about this tall?" He held his hand at Clara's approximate height. "She was wearing a blue dress when she left, though I imagine that would be in tatters by now. Like I said, have not seen anyone." One of the brothers leaned forward in his saddle. "Carlton, he is lying. Look at him. There is smoke coming from that cabin and I can smell bread baking. He has got a woman in there." Douglas's face went hard. "I am going to ask you one more time, and I suggest you think carefully about your answer. Is my wife in that cabin?" Kade raised his rifle, not pointing it directly at them but making his intent clear. "I said I have not seen any women, and this is my land, properly filed and claimed." "You are trespassing. I suggest you turn around and head back down the mountain." The brothers reached for their pistols, but Douglas held up a hand to stop them. "There is no need for violence. I am a reasonable man. How about this, friend? You let me look inside that cabin just to satisfy my mind that my wife is not there. If she is not, we will leave you in peace. If she is, well, then we take her and you get to keep breathing. Everybody wins." "No," Kade said flatly, Douglas's face flushed with anger. "You are making a mistake. I am a wealthy man with powerful friends. I can make your life very difficult. You are welcome to try. But you do it from down the mountain. You have got 5 seconds to turn those horses around before I shoot you for trespassing." The standoff lasted for a long moment, tension thick in the cold air. Finally, Douglas jerked his reins, wheeling his horse around. "This is not over," he snarled. "I will be back with the law. We will see how tough you are then." Kade watched them ride away, his rifle still raised, until they disappeared down the trail. Only then did he lower it and turn back to the cabin. Clara stood in the doorway, her face pale. "He knows I am here," she said. "Maybe, maybe not. He suspects, but he does not know for sure. He will come back. You heard him. He will bring a sheriff or marshal and they will search the cabin." Kade set the rifle inside and closed the door, then pulled Clara into his arms. She was shaking, and he could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his chest. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "We knew this was a possibility. We have been preparing for it all winter. Now we follow through." "What do you mean?" "I mean we go to Silver City. Today. We get you a lawyer, we end your marriage to Douglas legally, and we make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man he is. A man who beats his wife, who bought her from her dead father's debts. Once the truth is out, Douglas loses his power over you. But what if the law sides with him? He is my husband in the eyes of the church and state. What if they make me go back to him?" "Then we run," Kade said simply. "We pack up, we leave, and we do not stop until we find a place he cannot reach us. California maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere we can start fresh and build the life we want." Clara pulled back to look at him. "You would do that? Give up your home, your land, everything you have built here?" In a heartbeat, Kade cupped her face in his hands. "You are my home now, Clara. Where you go, I go. Always." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and he held her like she was the most precious thing in the world because she was. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Kade packed supplies and ammunition. Clara gathered the few possessions she had accumulated over the winter. By nightfall, they were ready to leave at first light. They would take Kade's 2 horses and ride hard for Silver City, a journey of 3 or 4 days if the weather held. That night they barely slept, lying together by the fire and talking in whispers about what came next. Both knew the next few days would determine everything. Either they would win Clara's freedom legally, or they would spend the rest of their lives running. Either way, they would face it together. When dawn came, they set out. The journey to Silver City was long but uneventful. They rode south through the mountains, following game trails and staying off the main roads as much as possible. Kade kept a watchful eye behind them, but there was no sign of pursuit. Either Douglas had gone back to Denver to regroup, or he was waiting in Silver City itself. Clara proved herself an excellent rider, keeping pace with Kade even over rough terrain. She had grown strong over the winter, her body lean and capable from hard work and mountain living. She no longer looked like the frightened woman who had stumbled into the trading post. She looked like someone who could survive anything. They reached Silver City on the 4th day, riding into town just as the sun was setting. The town was busy, miners and merchants filling the streets, the sound of a piano drifting from one of the saloons. Kade led them to a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, a woman who had always been kind to him on his infrequent visits to town. "Kade Ramsey, Mrs. Patterson said when she opened the door, her weathered face creasing into a smile. "I thought you might have frozen to death up in those mountains. Come in, come in." Her eyes moved to Clara and sharpened with interest. "And who is this?" "This is Clara," Kade said. "She needs a room and I need a lawyer. Best one in town." Mrs. Patterson studied Clara for a moment, taking in the worn but clean dress, the strong hands, the way she stood close to Kade. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her. "The best lawyer is Samuel Holbrook. His office is on Main Street, right next to the Mercantile, but he is also in my parlor right now, having dinner." She opened the door wider. "Why do not you both come in and we can discuss whatever trouble has brought you down from the mountain?" They followed her inside to a cozy parlor where a gray-haired man sat eating stew. He looked up when they entered and raised an eyebrow. "Kade Ramsey. I have not seen you in, 2 years? 3, Kade said. "Samuel, I need your help." Samuel Holbrook set down his spoon and gestured to the empty chairs. "Sit. Tell me everything." So they did. Clara told her story from the beginning, her voice steady despite the pain of reliving it all. She told about her father's death, Carlton Douglas's proposal, the marriage that had been more like a prison, the beatings and control and fear. She told about running, about finding Kade, about the winter they had spent together in the mountains. When she finished, the room was silent. "You want to end your marriage," Samuel said finally. "Yes." "And you want to marry Kade?" "Yes." Samuel leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "It is not a simple matter. In the eyes of the law, you are still Carlton Douglas's wife. He has legal rights to you, unpleasant as that is to say. However, you have grounds for divorce on the basis of cruelty and abuse. We would need witnesses to testify to your injuries, to the bruises and broken ribs you mentioned. Do you have any?" Clara's face fell. "No, Carlton was always careful. He only hit me where it would not show, and he never did it in front of others. That makes it harder, but not impossible. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, if we can find others who can testify to his character, we might be able to convince a judge. It would help if Douglas himself were here and we could confront him in court." "He is here," Kade said grimly, "or he will be soon. He tracked Clara to my mountain and I sent him away, but he said he would come back with the law. He thinks I am hiding his wife." "Which you are." "Which I am," Kade agreed, "but she does not want to be found. That should count for something." Samuel nodded slowly. "In a moral sense, yes. In a legal sense, it is more complicated. A husband has rights over his wife's movements and decisions. If Douglas goes to the marshal and claims his wife has been kidnapped, that could put you in a very difficult position, Kade." "So what do we do?" Clara asked, her voice breaking. "Is there no way out of this?" "There is always a way out," Samuel said. "It just might not be pretty. Here is what I suggest. We file for divorce immediately, citing abuse and cruelty. We present you to the judge and let him see that you are here of your own free will, that you have not been kidnapped or coerced. We ask for a protective order to keep Douglas away from you while the divorce is pending, and we gather as much evidence as we can about his character and behavior." "How long will all that take?" Kade asked. "Months, maybe longer. Divorce is not a quick process, and if Douglas contests it, it could drag on for a year or more." Clara made a sound of despair. "I cannot wait that long. I cannot keep running and hiding and looking over my shoulder." "Then we need to make Douglas give up," Samuel said. "We need to make it clear that pursuing you will cost him more than he is willing to pay." "How do we do that?" Samuel smiled, a sharp expression that made him look like a predator. "We drag his name through the mud. We make sure everyone in Denver and Silver City knows what kind of man he is. We find every person he has wronged, every debt he has collected cruelly, every unsavory deal he has made. We destroy his reputation so thoroughly that holding on to you becomes more trouble than it is worth." Clara looked at Kade, hope dawning in her eyes. "Can we do that?" "We can try," Kade said. "It is better than running for the rest of our lives." They spent the next week preparing their case. Samuel filed the divorce petition and requested an emergency hearing to establish Clara's autonomy. He sent telegrams to Denver, calling in favors and asking questions about Carlton Douglas. The responses that came back painted a picture of a man who was ruthless in business, cruel to those who crossed him, and generally feared rather than respected. Meanwhile, Kade and Clara stayed at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, waiting and worrying. The old widow took a liking to Clara, teaching her to bake proper bread and introducing her to the other women in town. Word spread quickly that Kade Ramsey had come down from the mountains with a woman, and speculation ran wild. On the 8th day, Carlton Douglas arrived. He rode into Silver City with his 2 hired men and went straight to the marshal's office. Within an hour, the marshal appeared at Mrs. Patterson's door, looking uncomfortable. "Kade Ramsey," he said when Kade answered. "I am Marshal Hewitt. I need to speak with you and the woman you have with you." "Her name is Clara Douglas," Kade said, "and she is staying here of her own free will, so she is here." Hewitt nodded slowly. "Her husband says you kidnapped her. Her husband is a liar. That may be, but he has the law on his side. She is his wife." "Not for long," Samuel Holbrook said, appearing behind Kade. "I am representing Mrs. Douglas in a divorce proceeding. She is seeking to end her marriage on the grounds of abuse and cruelty." Hewitt looked pained. "Mr. Holbrook, you know as well as I do that a woman cannot just leave her husband because she is unhappy. The law does not work that way. The law also does not allow a man to beat his wife until her ribs break," Samuel said coldly. "Mrs. Douglas has injuries to prove her claims. We intend to present them to a judge. That is for a court to decide, not me. Right now, I have a man claiming his wife has been kidnapped. I need to bring her in and hear her side of the story." Kade stepped forward, his face hard. "If you try to take Clara anywhere against her will, we are going to have a problem." Hewitt held up his hands. "I am not trying to take anyone anywhere. I am just asking her to come to my office and make a statement. That is all. If she says she is here by choice, then that is the end of it." Clara appeared then, moving to stand beside Kade. She looked at the marshal with steady eyes. "I am here by choice. Kade Ramsey did not kidnap me. He saved my life. My husband, Carlton Douglas, is a cruel and violent man. He beat me throughout our marriage. I ran away because I feared he would kill me. I do not wish to return to him, and I am seeking a divorce." Hewitt studied her for a long moment. "You willing to swear to that in court?" "Yes." "All right then." Hewitt touched his hat. "I will tell Mr. Douglas that his wife is here voluntarily and is seeking a divorce. What happens after that is between you, him, and the judge." He left, and Kade let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Clara sagged against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "That is the first step," Samuel said. "Now we wait for the hearing." The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, Carlton Douglas made his presence known throughout Silver City. He stayed at the best hotel, bought drinks for influential men, and spread his own version of events. According to him, Clara was a confused and unstable woman who had been seduced by a mountain man and led astray. He was a wronged husband, devastated by his wife's betrayal, seeking only to bring her home where she belonged. Some people believed him. But many more believed Clara, especially after the women of Silver City heard her story. Mrs. Patterson made sure of that, inviting Clara to tea with the other respectable ladies of town and giving her a chance to tell her side. When they saw the scars on Clara's arms from Carlton's grip, when they heard about the broken ribs and split lips, their sympathy turned to outrage. By the time the hearing arrived, public opinion was firmly divided. Half the town thought Clara was a victim fleeing abuse. The other half thought she was an ungrateful wife making up stories. The judge would decide which side was right. The hearing took place in the Silver City Courthouse, a small wooden building that served as both court and town hall. Judge Morrison was a stern man in his 60s, known for being fair but strict. He listened as Samuel presented Clara's case, detailing the abuse she had suffered and her reasons for leaving. Carlton Douglas had his own lawyer, a slick man from Denver who argued that Clara was lying, that there was no proof of abuse, that women often exaggerated their complaints to get out of marriages they found inconvenient. He painted Clara as a gold digger who had married Douglas for his money and was now trying to escape with her lover. Kade sat in the gallery, his hands clenched into fists, forcing himself to stay calm. He wanted nothing more than to drag Douglas outside and teach him the kind of lesson the mountains taught, swift and brutal. But this was Clara's fight, and she had to win it her way. When it was Clara's turn to testify, she stood with her head high and told her story once more. She did not cry or plead. She simply stated the facts, her voice clear and unwavering. Yes, she had married Carlton Douglas. Yes, he had beaten her. Yes, she had run away. Yes, she had fallen in love with another man, but only after she had left her husband, only after she had chosen freedom over captivity. "Mrs. Douglas," the judge said when she finished, "do you have any physical proof of the abuse you claim?" Clara hesitated, then unbuttoned the cuff of her sleeve and pushed it back. Her forearm was marked with old bruises, faded to yellow-green but still visible, finger marks where Carlton had gripped her too hard. "I have scars," she said quietly. "And if needed, I can show the doctor where my ribs were broken and healed improperly." Judge Morrison studied the marks, his face impassive. Then he turned to Carlton Douglas. "Mr. Douglas, do you deny causing these injuries?" "I do," Douglas said smoothly. "My wife is clumsy. She was always bruising herself on furniture." "That is a lie," Clara said, her voice shaking now with anger. "He hit me. Repeatedly. He told me I was his property, that he could do whatever he wanted to me." "You have no proof of that," Douglas's lawyer interjected. "These are just accusations without evidence." "The scars are evidence," Samuel said sharply. The courtroom erupted in argument, both sides shouting over each other until Judge Morrison banged his gavel. "Order! Everyone be quiet." He waited until the room settled, then looked at Clara. "Mrs. Douglas, I am inclined to believe that some harm came to you. However, proving who caused that harm is another matter. Without witnesses or documentation, it is your word against your husband's." Clara's face fell, and Kade felt his heart sink. They were going to lose. The judge was going to side with Douglas because he was a man and had money and influence. But then Mrs. Patterson stood up from the gallery. "Your Honor, if I may speak." Judge Morrison looked surprised. "Mrs. Patterson, this is not a town meeting." "I know that, but I have information relevant to this case. I was in Denver last month visiting my sister, and I happened to mention Clara Douglas's situation. My sister told me something interesting. She said there was another woman, a few years back, who was engaged to Carlton Douglas. The engagement ended suddenly and the woman left Denver. Rumor was that Douglas had struck her during an argument and her father broke off the engagement." The courtroom went silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Do you know this woman's name?" "Rebecca Thornton. She moved to Santa Fe. But I have her address and I sent her a telegram. She wrote back saying she would be willing to testify if needed." Douglas went pale. "This is nonsense, gossip and slander." "Is it?" Judge Morrison's voice was cold. "Mrs. Patterson, please provide Miss Thornton's contact information to the court." "I am postponing this hearing until we can verify these claims." The hearing was adjourned, and as people filed out, Douglas grabbed Clara's arm. His grip was bruising, familiar, and she cried out in pain. Kade was on him in an instant, breaking his hold and shoving him back. "Touch her again and I will break your hand," Kade said quietly. "She is my wife," Douglas snarled. "I will touch her whenever I want." "Not anymore, you will not." Kade stepped between Clara and Douglas, his presence a solid wall of protection. "Hearing is not over yet, but it will be soon. And when it is, Clara will be free of you. And if you ever come near her again, if you ever so much as look at her wrong, I will make sure you regret it." Douglas stared at him with pure hatred, but he backed down. He was a coward at heart, Kade realized. He only hurt people he thought could not fight back. Faced with someone his own size who was not afraid of him, he folded. The next 2 weeks were tense. Samuel sent telegrams back and forth with Rebecca Thornton, who confirmed that Carlton Douglas had indeed struck her during their engagement. She also revealed that he had a reputation in Denver for being cruel to servants and employees, that several people had left his service with bruises they would not explain. With this information, Samuel built a case that painted Douglas as a pattern abuser. When the hearing reconvened, Rebecca Thornton herself appeared, having traveled from Santa Fe to testify. She told her story calmly and clearly, and when she was done, even Douglas's lawyer looked shaken. Judge Morrison took less than an hour to make his decision. "Mrs. Clara Douglas," he said, "I am granting your petition for divorce. Based on the evidence presented, I find that you were subjected to cruelty and abuse sufficient to warrant the dissolution of your marriage. You are hereby declared legally separated from Carlton Douglas, and upon the completion of the required waiting period, your marriage will be annulled." Clara burst into tears, and Kade pulled her into his arms. Around them, the courtroom erupted in applause from those who had supported her. Douglas stood stony-faced, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. "Furthermore," Judge Morrison continued, "I am issuing a restraining order. Mr. Douglas, you are not to come within 100 yards of your former wife. You are not to contact her in any way, and you are not to interfere in her life. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" Douglas said nothing for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. Without another word, he turned and strode from the courtroom, his hired men following. He did not look back. When he was gone, Clara turned to Kade. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "I am free," she whispered. "I am finally free." "You are," Kade said, kissing her forehead. "And now we can build the life we want." They were married 3 months later, after the divorce was finalized and Clara was legally no longer Mrs. Carlton Douglas. The wedding took place in Silver City, with Mrs. Patterson and Samuel Holbrook standing as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, but it was theirs, chosen freely and given with love. Clara wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson helped her sew, pale blue with white lace, and Kade wore his best shirt and pants, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. When the preacher asked if he took Clara to be his wife, Kade's voice rang out clear and firm. "I do." And when he asked Clara, she smiled through tears and said, "I do. Forever." They returned to the mountain as husband and wife, to the cabin that had been Clara's refuge and was now her home. Over the summer they built an addition, expanding the cabin into a proper house with 2 rooms and a kitchen. They cleared land for a garden, and Clara planted vegetables and herbs that thrived in the mountain soil. Kade built a barn and bought a milk cow and some chickens, and the clearing around their home became a small homestead. Life was hard but good. They worked together, side by side, building something that was truly theirs. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence when there were no words needed. Kade taught Clara to track elk and read the signs of changing weather. Clara taught Kade to appreciate poetry and the beauty of a well-told story, reading aloud from his small collection of books. They made love under the stars on warm summer nights and cuddled close under firs when winter came again. They argued sometimes about small things like how to season venison or which horse needed new shoes, but they never went to bed angry. They had both seen what happened when love turned to control and fear, and they were determined their marriage would be different. In the spring of 1878, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Kade one morning over coffee, her eyes shining with joy and fear. "I am going to have a baby," she said. "Are you ready to be a father?" Kade set down his cup, his hands trembling. "A baby?" "Yes." He stood and crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair and placing his hands on her still flat belly. "I am terrified," he said honestly, "but also happier than I have ever been. We are going to have a child, Clara, our child. Are you sure you want this? It will change everything." "Everything already changed the day you walked into the trading post," Kade said. "This is just the next chapter of our story." Their son was born in November, during the first snowfall of winter. Kade delivered him with Mrs. Patterson's help, the old widow having traveled up the mountain a month before to assist. The baby came into the world squalling and red-faced, healthy and strong. They named him Thomas, after Clara's father, and he had Cade's dark hair and Clara's brown eyes. From the moment Kade held him, he was lost. He had thought he knew what love was, but holding his son in his arms showed him a whole new depth of feeling he had not known existed. Clara recovered well from the birth, and soon their home was filled with the sounds of a baby. Thomas was a good child, fussy only when hungry or tired, content to be held and sung to. Kade took to fatherhood like he took to everything, with quiet competence and deep devotion. He made a cradle from pine wood, smoothed and polished until it gleamed. He paced the floor on long nights when Thomas could not sleep, rocking him and humming old mountain songs his own father had taught him. "You are going to spoil him," Clara teased, watching from the bed. "Good," Kade said. "He should know he is loved." As Thomas grew, their family flourished. Kade expanded their homestead, building a larger barn and clearing more land. They bought more livestock, a few pigs and a second cow, and their garden grew every year. Clara became known throughout the mountains for her medicinal herbs and remedies, and occasionally trappers or traders would stop by seeking help for various ailments. When Thomas was 3, Clara became pregnant again. This time their child was a girl, born in the spring when the world was bursting with new life. They named her Sarah, and she had Clara's delicate features and Cade's quiet strength. She was more outgoing than her brother, always laughing and demanding attention, and she had Kade wrapped around her little finger from day one. "2 children," Clara said one evening as they sat on the porch watching Thomas and Sarah play in the yard. "Can you believe it?" "Sometimes I have to remind myself this is real," Kade admitted. "That you are real, that this life is real, it feels too good to be true." Clara took his hand. "It is real. We built this together. We earned this happiness." "You earned it," Kade said. "You had the courage to run when you needed to and the strength to build a new life from nothing. I just gave you a place to do it." "You gave me everything," Clara corrected. "You gave me kindness when I needed it most. You gave me safety and love and a home. You became my home, Kade Ramsey. And I will love you until the day I die." Years passed, each one building on the last. Thomas grew tall and serious like his father, learning to hunt and trap and survive in the wilderness. Sarah grew bold and clever like her mother, always asking questions and pushing boundaries. They had 2 more children, another boy they named Henry and a girl they named Elizabeth. The cabin became a proper house, 2 stories with glass windows and a stone foundation. Cade's hair went gray at the temples, and Clara's face gained laugh lines around her eyes. They grew older together, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They never forgot where they had come from, the fear and pain that had brought them together, but they did not dwell on it either. The past was the past. What mattered was the present they had built and the future they were creating for their children. Clara Douglas never came back. They heard through traders that he had remarried, another young woman from a good family, and moved to California. Clara felt sorry for his new wife, but knew there was nothing she could do. Some men never changed. She could only be grateful that she had escaped and found someone who treated her as she deserved to be treated. When Thomas turned 18, Kade took him on a long hunting trip, just the two of them in the deep wilderness. Around the campfire one night, Kade told his son the full story of how he and Clara had met, how she had come to the mountain as a stranger seeking kindness, and how he had given it. "Your mother is the bravest person I have ever known," Kade said. "She ran into the wilderness with nothing but hope and determination. She learned to survive in a place that kills the unprepared. She rebuilt her life from ashes. And she chose to love me, which still seems like the greatest gift I could ever receive." "You chose to love her too," Thomas pointed out. "You could have turned her away. Most men would have." "Most men are fools," Kade said. "When someone extraordinary walks into your life, you do not send them away. You give them kindness and see where it leads." "Is that advice for me?" Thomas asked with a small smile. "It is advice for anyone. Kindness costs nothing but can change everything. I was alone on this mountain for 6 years and I thought I was content. But I was not living, just existing. Your mother taught me the difference." Thomas nodded slowly. "I understand, and I will remember." Sarah grew into a young woman who inherited her mother's sharp mind and her father's steady hands. She could shoot as well as her brothers, ride better than most men, and negotiate trades that left visiting trappers shaking their heads in admiration. But she also had her mother's kindness, always ready to help a neighbor or care for a sick animal. Henry became a scholar, his nose always in one of the books that now filled an entire shelf in the house. He talked about going to Denver or Santa Fe to study properly. And though it pained Kade to think of his son leaving the mountain, he supported the dream. Elizabeth, the youngest, was still finding her way, but she showed signs of becoming an artist, always drawing pictures of the landscape and animals around their home. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kade and Clara rode back down to Silver City. They had not been back since Thomas was born, their lives too full and busy on the mountain. But Mrs. Patterson had written asking them to visit, saying she wanted to see how they were doing before she got too old to care. Silver City had grown in the intervening years. There were more buildings, more people, a real sense of permanence that had been lacking before. But Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was unchanged, and the old widow herself was as sharp as ever despite her 70 years. "Look at you two," she said, embracing Clara. "Still happy as newlyweds. It does my heart good." They stayed for a week, visiting with old friends and introducing their children to the town. Samuel Holbrook, now retired from law, invited them to dinner and told stories of the famous divorce case that had set precedent for women's rights in New Mexico Territory. "You changed things, Clara," he said. "After your case, other women found the courage to leave abusive marriages. You gave them hope." Clara squeezed Kade's hand under the table. "Kade gave me hope first. I just passed it along." On their last night in town, they attended a dance at the community hall. Kade, who had not danced in 20 years, held Clara close as they swayed to the music. She rested her head on his chest, and he breathed in the familiar scent of her hair. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "More than I ever thought possible," Clara said. "You?" "Every single day." They returned to their mountain, to their children and their homestead and their life. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but always underpinned by the love that had brought them together. Their children grew and started families of their own, some staying on the mountain and some venturing into the wider world. But they all returned often, bringing grandchildren who filled the house with laughter. Kade and Clara grew old together, their bodies slowing but their hearts still strong. They sat on their porch in the evenings and watched the sun set over the peaks they had called home for so long. They held hands like young lovers and talked about the past with fondness and the present with contentment. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked one evening when they were both in their 60s, gray-haired and weathered. "Taking me in that day, your life would have been simpler without me." Kade laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Simpler, yes, but empty. You brought me back to life, Clara. You made me remember what it meant to care about something beyond just surviving another winter. Regret you? Never. Not for a single moment." "I love you," Clara said, the same words she had spoken thousands of times over the decades but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Kade replied. "Then, now, and always." They lived out their days on that mountain, surrounded by family and love, their story becoming legend among the trappers and traders who passed through. The tale of the woman who came as a stranger seeking kindness, and the mountain man who gave her kindness and became her home, who fell in love and built a life that lasted half a century. When Kade finally passed at the age of 78, Clara held his hand and whispered that she would see him soon. True to her word, she followed him 3 months later, dying peacefully in her sleep in the house they had built together. Their children buried them side by side on the mountain, under the pines they had both loved, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their long, full lives. The homestead remained in the family for generations, passing from child to grandchild to great-grandchild, each one adding to the legacy. And always, the story was told of how it began, with a frightened woman stumbling into a trading post in November 1876, and a lonely mountain man who chose kindness over caution, who gave her shelter and taught her strength, who fell in love with her courage and married her as soon as she was free, who built a life with her that became a testament to what love could be when it was freely given and fiercely protected. Their love story became part of the mountain itself, woven into the land and the trees and the stones. And every spring when the snow melted and new life burst forth, it was as if Kade and Clara were there still, walking hand in hand through the forest, their laughter echoing on the wind, their love eternal as the peaks that had witnessed their beginning and sheltered them until the end. The end.